Yeah, I'm from the University of Lübeck, and I now landed in the computer science department, and I'm the head of the Institute for Information System. But I started as a student in cognitive science, so we were the first students in cognitive science in Germany and in Osnabrück. Yeah. So yeah, it was quite interesting to go through different disciplines, as sometimes cognitive scientists do. And I'm particularly interested in dynamic, flexible human AI interaction. So this is one of my favorite pictures for a start of a presentation because it shows how amazing our cognitive mind is for dynamic, complex situations. So you see there are a lot of fast cars driving by. You have a lot of people running on the road, not following any official rules, and everybody's quite relaxed. And that's something that intelligent systems are still not able to do. So they're not able to understand what's happening, what the situation, if there are no official rules followed and unexpected things happening. And we as cognitive beings, we are quite aware to do that, but we still haven't completely understood why. So we have some theories about it, but I'm actually interested in how good can we describe that? The cognitive system in the wild. And can we learn that and model that? And can we give that, provide that to intelligent systems so they will be able to better interact with us? And that's actually what I'm curious about. So high, uncertain, complex situations. So I don't think I can build a robot with cognitive abilities that can manage this, but maybe similar situation. We have a lot of dynamic decision making going on. So they are not singular decisions, but they build upon each other. Of course, real time, we heard that earlier. So that's a question on how good can we use the time we have available to make decisions, for example, or to react. So sometimes you've seen earlier in the talk, in other talks, that people need to consider how much time is left to make a decision. And then you might not make the optimal decision, but still something that might be valid. And what we also see, people need to coordinate different tasks. So you have information coming in. You need to navigate. You need to make decisions. You might need to take opportunities because you want to overtake somebody or, I don't know, do something else. So you need to coordinate all these different tasks. And we also have a constant stream of very complex information. And of course, our cognitive system is bounded. So we need to filter out what is relevant, what is not relevant. And we can do that without too much effort. And that would be really, really helpful for intelligent systems to have some of these capabilities, not the complete plate, but some of it. So what enables our cognitive system to cope with that easily? And I think there are some specific cognitive principles that help us to do that. And I will show you some of the principles that I've worked on, but I also want to argue for looking more at the whole cognitive system and the whole cognitive systems in more complex and dynamic tasks. So we come closer to real world situations and examples. Okay. So here you have a picture of a camera. And we've talked about this earlier. It's very nice to have all these presentations before me, so I don't need to go through all the 20 questions to nature and so on. So as you see here, you have all the components laid out. And that's actually what was the situation before people decided that it would be good to have a unified theory of cognition. So to find out how do these parts work together, can we combine them? And I think in some areas, we again come into to this point that people get more and more into details, but they don't come back to the whole system. So people again start to go in very, very small details, which is completely okay. But I think it's a very relevant quest to understand the cognitive system as a whole, how it works, how parts come together. And maybe we don't need to look at all different aspects that might not be that relevant for the sake of having a complete system that operates sufficiently in complex situations. So I want to build something like that. So it's not the perfect picture of the whole system, but it shows what are the relevant mechanisms that help us to cope with specific situations and tasks. So that's actually what I try to do. So I'm building my camera in a simplified way and see how it works and what it can do. Oh, so cognitive principles for interaction are fundamental rules and mental processes that govern how the human brain acquires, processes, stores, and retrieves information in interaction with realistic environments. Rooted in cognitive science and psychology, they explain how perception, memory, and learning come together in order to act meaningful in a complex, dynamic, real-world tasks. So some of these principles that I want to talk a little bit about are, for example, mental models. We heard already about some mental models, how they can be gained and updated by a cognitive model. Structured representations, of course, we know that's relevant for such systems. So I will look a little bit at situation awareness and person models. And then we come to the social part, anticipation of others. For example, in a task, to understand what would need to happen next, what probably would do the other person. So that's something that's quite crucial. And another point, of course, metacognition is also such a cognitive principle. So I will look at the sense of control here, because being in a real world, we always need to find out, am I acting in a helpful way at the moment? And am I doing progress in the way I think I'm doing that? And if not, I need to find out very, very quickly to change my strategy. So if you go outside and there's a strong wind coming and you don't lean against the wind, you will fall over. And these are things that are quite relevant if you have intelligent systems enter the real world. So we have this control loop running, and I will show you a little bit about it. So I have 3 parts of the talk. So the first part, I might be able to make a little bit shorter because you already learned a lot about cognitive architectures and cognitive systems. Then there are 2 views, there are visions of intelligent systems that work in synergy with us. And the third part is about intelligent embodied systems. So we work already a lot with robots that get a cognitive architecture into their head. But actually, I will show you some other principles. I will not go too deeply in that topic. That will be another talk. But I'm quite interested in that area. Okay. Cognitive architectures to understand cognitive systems in task interaction. So we have different kinds of models, and we already talked about that. So a classical view is, for example, that there are phenomenological models that describe observed data performance. We talked about large language models that might go that way. Mechanistic models that describe mechanisms, organized components and interactions responsible for specific phenomena. And then we have theoretical models, but they describe abstract theoretical approaches, which are not helpful if we want to let those models run. So the first part of models is unlikely to reflect causal processes and not derived from theoretical principles, or we cannot look inside of them. The mechanistic models, of course, here we have processes or mechanisms, reflect causal processes, usually derived from some theoretical principle. And the last group of models is more about the ideal world. It's very abstract. No phenomena are used to develop or proof of concept. So that's why I'm so much interested in this group of models. Okay, so here we have a cognitive system, and these kind of cognitive systems. So I will later talk about cognitive architectures. Now I talk about cognitive systems. They're oriented towards human skills and capabilities. They can perceive and understand things and draw conclusions and learn. Okay. They can also dependently react to unexpected events. And of course, that we need when we go into the real world. So in Act R, we usually do have some fallback procedures when you don't find the specific information you're looking for, something else happens, you have some bottom-up processes. But this is usually something that's quite difficult with a lot of those, so to say, AI methods at the moment. Also, we need systems that have an overview of its own context, environmental influences, interact with its surrounding, draws corresponding conclusions, optimizes its actions. Some of them can be done by other methods as well. So the specific thing about these cognitive systems is that they not just explain, but perform cognitive functions. So we can let those models run and we can see what happens when they run, when they behave. And I think that's quite interesting. And we should take them out of these experimental situations into more realistic situations. For example, let them interact with systems, for example, with smartphones or apps, or maybe let them interact as a robot or put them into systems. And I think that's possible. So now I give you an idea about what cognitive architectures are, although we talked about this, so sorry for the German here. So our cognitive systems are all a little bit different, but we share general structures and processes. And that's the same with our apartments, houses. We usually do have walls, we usually do have different rooms. And in these rooms, specific processes happen. Usually you have windows to look outside, you have a door to go outside. So there are specific things happening. So let's take out the content and let's look at the core structure of the cognitive architecture. So the architecture provides structures that are empty at the moment and processes that work on these structures. For example, in the kitchen, you need running water. You usually have a fridge where you can cool stuff. You can store stuff. In the bathroom, you might also have running water, maybe a bathtub, and other things. So they all have specific processing running in them. When you write a cognitive model, you need to define what the content is. So is this a student living in an apartment with other fellow students? Or is it a family and what's happening there? So that would be, so to say, the cognitive model that you need to write. So what should be running on the structures? And that's the idea of a cognitive architecture and the cognitive models you write that should happen on these structures. So yeah, I think I don't need to go more into details here. So here we have a structure. So we have the external world. Information is perceived visually, orally, and you can act on a motor model or vocal modules. And these can all run in parallel. And this in the middle, the procedural module, it's considering at every cycle what is provided, what kind of information. Then it makes its decision, what rule should now fire to go into the next step. So here we have our modules. Then we have incoming, outgoing information. And here we have the production system. And interesting are the doors. In these doors for Act R, there's only one piece of information sitting. So when you've watched something, it's processed and then it sits here and it's available for the production system. And if you retrieve something from memory, it sits here at some point and it's available. sometimes you need to think a bit longer. So you need some cycles until you get the information because it has a low activation level and so on and so on. So if the production is initiating some action because all information is available, this information, this request goes to this door, so the motor model can take care of and does its action until it has provided everything. So that's the main idea of this architecture. And what's nice is all these modules, they work in parallel. You can take these modules out and you can take new in, or you can add others. So if you think, so we heard about the temporal module, that is another one that you can add here that's available. But also I've built also some modules. So if you think that would make it more complete, and of course there's still a lot of components missing, you can add them. But you can also use something completely different. So what we did is, for example, add a large language model here for providing some information that it gathered. For example, what a person said or what information is available in the room on the visual content. So you can change this. And that is quite interesting, actually. Okay. Yeah, so we talked already about these two types of knowledge. So declarative knowledge in chunks and procedural knowledge in rules. That are quite flexible, so you can add different content, or you can relate to the content that's available to the procedure. So this, yeah, I think that's enough for you to follow on this. So now we come to the modular structure in particular. So it's similar structured as the brain with different brain areas that are actually, yeah, have the purpose or are actually matching the module. And there we go. And what I think here is quite interesting, these models that we build should actually have a correspondence to neurobiology. So if we have a picture of the EEG running, we should see that the dynamics of activation should be similar to if we build a really good model in ACT-R. So the temporal dynamics should be similar and the locations should also be similar. So I think that's quite an interesting way to go to think about, do our theories in cognitive psychology implemented in such a model, do they really capture what our real brain is doing when we do the task? And there has been some work done. We also did some of that, and we worked on spatial tasks. This one is a folding task, so you need to fold this, and then you say, if this is the correct box. And we also did mental rotation on that with a colleague from neurobiology, Klaus Kramann. And that was quite interesting. It got more complex than I was expecting it to do, but it was quite interesting. So we can see here that this is the human data. Here we have the modeling data for simple examples and reaction times and so on. So you can see reaction times, and we talked about evaluation. So if you just look at reaction times, it might not be sufficient. You need to look at further information. And here we see the different components. We had independent component clusters for different modules, and see if the modules light up. The components light up at the same moment where the modules are active in this task. So we learned a lot about this, and some of that corresponds very nicely. Some of it doesn't. For example, the imaginal module that we thought should be very active was not active, but maybe we got the wrong cluster here. But that was a very interesting way to look at it. What I want to show you here is more about the holistic idea of a cognitive architecture, what it can tell us about cognitive processes in the dynamics of a task. So that means I will not go deeper in this, but if you're interested in, we have some of the several publications on this topic. Okay, so now I want to move to the second part, the vision of intelligent systems that work in synergy with us. So I start with what is AI actually? And when you hear people talking about AI, you hear very different things. So for example, oh, the AI is intending to do this or that, or everybody uses AI, so meaning tools, or some people say AI is dangerous, or maybe it's also the future, and AI is perceived by humans as AI eases research work a lot. So this sounds like these are all different things we are talking about, right? So sometimes it's a method, sometimes it's like a big agent, sometimes it's, I don't know. And yeah, so is it a group of methods, new tools everybody uses, shows behavior difficult for humans to understand? We had that also. And I agree, but what are we talking about? It's actually, for me, AI is like a big research field. And there are three main directions of this AI research field. And one is constructing artifacts that act intelligently. Might be robot, might be something completely different. And then the second direction is to develop methodologies, algorithms, techniques for constructing such artifacts. So what do we need to build this intelligent agent, this intelligent robot or car or whatever? And then a third direction is this describe intelligent behavior as information processing task. So what do we need to solve? How do we need to process information to make decisions? Or the intelligent system, or we as intelligent systems. So that's more yeah, I think that helps a lot to think about this. So far, it has been, cognitive architectures has been like these artifacts that we want to construct that act intelligently. But now I think when we think about we need intelligent agents that are interacting in the real world, cognitive architectures might go into this area. So there are some part of methodologies we need for that to be able to act in complex situations, to have build situation awareness, or to use mental models. And maybe we need to add other methodologies to construct an intelligent system. So I think this way to think about it and to talk about AI does help a lot to not fall into too many pitfalls. Okay, humans and AI. So yeah, so previously AI were smart tools. Now they're getting more and more intelligent and also get closer to us in our everyday life. And sometimes they are viewed as interaction partners. And you've seen cases where people fall in love with a ChatGPT, or they think somebody is a good friend, but it's just a large language model they are talking to. So we are entering another level, maybe. So we do have expectations for these intelligent agents we are interacting with. And these intelligent systems, they are using that sometimes to manipulate us. And I think this is actually a really, really relevant part where we as cognitive scientists must jump in to find out how can we build such systems that we can work with them and are not manipulated and are not bringing up wrong expectations, but to work in a transparent way together. And I think that's a big quest. But I don't see what other discipline would take over for that task. So very interesting is that we are actually changing from discrete interactions to continuous two-way interactions. So far, we pushed buttons and then it was clear what happens. But now the systems are more complex. So we need to make expectations what will happen when I do this or that, or what the system wants to do when it behaves a different way. And then I try to react on that. So we have a completely different way to interact with each other. And that opens up new questions and also interesting questions. because now we need to work more on how are we really doing these two-way interactions with other people, for example. So I think it's a shift in perspective that we need to think of. Okay, so how can such systems adapt to people? Are predictable, so we are not surprised what's happening there. How can they anticipate human behavior? And contextualize information, interact with real world dynamic environments. Oh, sorry. And this actually is also an area of AI that's called intelligent agents. And it's actually quite similar to this. So for intelligent agents, to break it down, this is a picture from Russell and Norvig from the Bible of AI, kind of. There are different types of intelligent agents. This one is a goal-driven and what was it? Goal-driven and there are different types. So we do have goals here. We do have percepts, sensors, and it's about what the world is like now. So we have a state, how the world evolves. We have some ideas about that, what my actions will do, what will it be like if I do a specific action. And then after I consider this, I need to consider my goal, what action should I do now? And then you do this, and actually what I think is quite relevant, what is the feedback of my action? So that is more like a cycle that should be considered here. So this is quite similar to the cognitive architecture I just showed you, just mirrored. So the environment is here, perceptions going in, action out. So we do have with our cognitive architectures quite a similar picture of an intelligent agent. Of course, we are intelligent agents, so there should be one. And now, when we build this nicely, we do have a better way to interact with each other, because then we might have a more similar way to interact, even if some of these components are not completely built as humans are, but we need to find out how should it behave that we can understand it. Okay, and not so much focus on single techniques and components, but more how they work together. So we have a good alignment of these two cognitive systems. Of course, just for the purposes of close human interaction, not for all purposes. And there's an area that's called human-aware AI that was built up by Subaru Kampampati, who was a former president of the IEEE, which is one of the big AI conferences. And what I like, he designed some research challenges in designing human-aware AI systems. And some of these points might sound familiar to you. And this is from a complete computer science scientist. So he said it's really relevant, it's a big challenge to modeling the mental states of human in the loop. Recognizing human desires and intentions, providing proactive support, exhibiting explicable behavior so people can understand what the system is doing, giving cogent explanation on demand. So it's a bit more than explainable AI, because it should be on demand explaining something to me and I understand what it's doing, and engendering trust. And I think these are quite interesting points, and that is actually a job description we got as cognitive scientists, because I think it's nice that this comes from computer science. Of course, computer science solves it their way and not really in a way we as cognitive scientists would solve it. But I think that's a point where the things come together again. So you're aware of cognitive science and AI has always been very closely connected. Then I think they parted a bit. And I think now they need to come back together closely. Okay, so we have models of big part of this whole thing, as you have seen, are expectations. How can we build up good expectations, and how can the system understand our expectations? So that doesn't work for everything, of course. we are actually black boxes for those systems. And of course, we are black boxes, but we have lived together for a long time. So we are quite well in anticipating other people or realizing when we are not very good in anticipating a person, then we need to ask or change our strategy. So this expectations and interpretation of situations is quite relevant for this quest. And there are a lot of models. So I just show you some. Some of you might be aware of the Sieve model from Wickens. This would be where our attention goes if you have a dynamic scene you're interacting with. Of course, expectancy is a big factor here. Situation awareness, you might have heard before. I think that's quite a relevant concept that might help a lot. So I would just explain to you for those who don't know it. Who knows situation awareness? Okay. Okay. So the idea is actually for complex situations, for driving a car, for flying a plane, how do you understand a situation? How do you get prepared? How do you work with that? You have information coming in, and then you need a mental model of what is the situation, what is the situation, for example, and then you can understand what you have perceived, even if it's not exactly as you were trained. It's more on a concept level, understand, okay, there's somebody taking over and driving, or somebody is, I don't know, trying to drive faster and wants that I go over to the other lane, so to take over, whatever. And so you comprehend the situation with your mental model, and then you can project into the future. That means you have an understanding what will happen next, because we as human beings need to be prepared what will happen next to act in time. And of course, other systems would need to do that too in real environments. We need to get prepared, and we need to know what to act or to maybe also be aware of, or what might happen, what might be dangerously happen, or whatever, what other options. So this is quite a relevant concept that can be modeled nicely in a simplified way. And there are some other models like predictive coding from Friston and Keeble. So you have predictions, and then you're checking if you're when the world develops, if your predictions are met, and if not, you have a prediction error, and then you need to work with this prediction error. I will talk later more about this. So this is also about that our brain is a predictive mind, kind of. Okay, so structured representations help us for those more complex situations. So when we have an intelligent agent, it should not just conduct a task, but it should learn through the interactions. And this is something we haven't done so often with cognitive modeling. So we learned stuff, but not that you learn through interactions and then you try to get better. So there has been some work on that, but it's still something there needs to be more progress, I think, in that field. And so why should we not just build models that can learn by themselves by interacting with the tools? So the critique on cognitive architectures has been that we as a modeler, we put all what we think how this works into our models. And when there's one task and you have 5 modelers, you might end up with 10 different models or even more. So why not just let a model interact with the situation and learn by itself? And here I see mental model more like a functional part. So when you try to learn how to use a new app, you need to interact with it and then you learn it. And if we find a way to model that on a simple form and it works, that's fine. So it doesn't need to meet all these different definitions of mental models. There are so many out there. But it's more seen as a functional part. So can we learn from that? And yeah, and if that model of this mental model, does it work the same way as we as humans acquire new knowledge about how to interact with something or updating similar human behavior. We did that, so we had an ACT-R model connected to a smartphone, and that ACT-R model worked on that smartphone, on the app, and that was actually a shopping app. This is Sabine Brzezinski who worked on that with me, and sorry. And what we did is first the people learned the whole thing with the 4 levels to get to the different products. And then we gave them another version with just 3 levels of interaction without the participants noticing. And it was a very simple model. All we gave them was a simple word knowledge. So they know that beer is associated with bottle shop, but not all these terms, how they are connected with each other. And then you have something like an instant-based learning. So you have the situation described, the action, and the expected outcome. And then we had a chunk, a control chunk that represents the uncertainty of the current strategy. That's it. So it was very simple. Thank you. So I will not go through all the details, but it was a very simple model. So it ran through the app, it's looking for the different products, and needed to do it several times and was actually getting quicker. And then we took another application that was about how looking for apartments or houses. And they were different in a different way. So it was not about the levels, but it was a different content. And these are the results. So we have the model in light blue and in dark blue, the participants. And first they worked on 4 levels, so they got quicker. Then we changed the app to the 3-level version. And yeah, they got a little bit faster, but that's it. So you see the participants took a bit longer, and of course they have more individual differences, but this is captured quite nicely. Then we did it the other way around. And what you see, first they got quicker, then they had the update, and then it took them a little bit longer because they needed to actually get the new information processed, and then they ended up near to the same level. Then we took the same model to the other app, and here we got this structure. So we didn't put too much knowledge into that. We just put the mental model component in there. And that worked out quite nice. We also used that for categorization of tones and other things. And it works quite nicely. Simple tasks, of course, but it helps to have this system interact with the environment and learn from that. So we as modelers don't need to make our own ideas, implement them in there. Okay, so we'll skip it. Oh. Okay, back again. So why and how to integrate cognitive models into embodied systems? That's the next part. So I need to start this. So this is about a human and a robot in a kitchen. And you will see that there are some problems arising because I cannot manage this. Let's see, now we go here.
Wow, it smells great, but I hope it tastes good too.
I hope so too. How many carrots was it again?
Sure I can. What kind of music would you like to listen to? I can really recommend a new Beatles collection.
No music.
Have you ever heard of the Beatles?
Okay. So that's what you might know from yourself. These things happen quite often. So we do have this robot that pretends to be in the same situation in the environment. It pretends to smell something and realize that the person is cooking. But in the end, it seems to just be able to play music. Maybe it can do more, but it doesn't understand what the human is asking it to. And it cannot differentiate between different lines of actions. And maybe there are also some misassumptions by the human because maybe he thought the robot would help by the cooking task, but yeah, there are so many things going wrong here. And we have a continuous interaction here running, but the system is not really able to do that. And you know that when you have your Google running in your car and you ask it to go somewhere, it's just this one discrete action you're allowed to ask, but it's not like a dialogue. And this is a big problem. So there are other things about expectations. Yeah, so many things that go wrong. So first point I told you, the continuous interaction, that's something new. So far we had discrete interactions, and Alexa and Co is still actually doing discrete interactions. You're asking, it's doing something, maybe it answers, but it's not like continuous. So this is a new challenge. This next point is the agent needs to be robust and flexible at the same time. It needs to adapt its behavior. It also needs to understand when it's wrong and when it needs to start again. The human in the loop needs to be anticipated. It's not happening there. So it doesn't count the carrots or what the human is doing. And more information of the environment needs to be integrated. So these are all the different aspects that are quite relevant for something like that. Here I have a small example from Dr. Oliver Klapproth, who was working with pilots. So he's from Airbus and was my former PhD student. And what we see here is a task of a pilot. And at some point, the question was if really 2 pilots are always necessary. Of course, for passenger flights, but not for all flights. But the task is quite complex. And how can you build an intelligent system that is supporting the pilot in all these tasks? So we try to do that with Act R. And usually people say Act R is, you can only do simple tasks. This is, of course, a little bit more complex, and it should work in real time. So that's quite a challenge. The largest proportion of pilot errors is due to incorrect perception and understanding of the situations. So this is a very old study by Ansley, so the same person from situation awareness, you might notice, but the cockpit still looked the same because for safety reasons, this is not changed a lot. Because if you change something and then an accident happens, this might be due to the change you did, so they don't change a lot. So it's still valid. And what we did is actually add information from the cockpit into the cognitive model. And the cognitive model is now simplified, so we don't have the whole architecture running with all the perception happening and so on. So later we did that also. But you can use information from the cockpit. So what has been seen by the person, what has been shown by the person, and it goes directly into the cognitive model. And also we had BCI, which was taking the EEG of the pilot about surprise reactions, because we wanted to know when is the person surprised and what does it mean in the situation? How can we support the person in that situation? And that was a simple model we actually had. So we had some situation awareness about what's the situation of the flying plane at the moment. These are not so relevant, but then waiting for the start, attend flight information, then checking at all these different things and continue at some point. But if something happens, here alert, there are different alerts that have different saliency and are crucial, some more, some less. This system might predict responses, check for the pilot response, and if there's no response found, there's nothing happen, but the pilot should react. It's checking the EEG data. And if there is event-related potential about surprise, a P300, this is predicted as response. So the person is surprised, and maybe that's why it's not reacting. And if there's no surprise, it's the person is aware. No. Oh, sorry. So if it is surprised, it might not have heard the alarm. So there is sometimes the effect that if there's too much happening, the pilot might not hear the alarm. Okay, so you can understand what's happening at the moment, and then you can provide the right assistance to the pilot, either play the alert again or explain what should happen now. So that's a way how to do that. And what we found is that the model without EEG was already quite good to explain what's happening. With EEG, even better. We did more on that, but that gives you an idea of what can a cognitive architecture do in a more complex system that's running. Okay, now I have how much? 2 minutes? 1 minute 3. Oh, okay. Okay, good. So last bit is the feeling of control. So when you are starting to skate, in the beginning, it feels like you have so many sensory feedback and you have problems to control your skates. When you have learned it a little bit, it's not a problem to skate on this ground. It feels a little bit insecure, but you know you're secure. And this way you can skate in a more relaxed way because you have different levels of control that are playing into this game. And this means at least we have 2 levels that give us information how good we are in control of our environment. So the sensory motor feedback would be one area. Another one would be the higher level belief sorry, of our skill. So that would be something else. If we have intelligent system come into our environment, they need to have an awareness of if they are going to be in control. And the robot you've seen earlier was not in control anymore, was not realizing that. Okay, so that was a larger project together with the University of Bielefeld, with Stefan Kopp. And we had 6 years to work intensively on this. And this is actually what we came up with. That's a simplified version. So we have an agent that's running in an environment. It's a simulated environment at the moment, but we want to go further to robots, for example. And there's some action going on. You have a simple sensory motor layer. I'll show you the environment soon. And as long as this is running nicely, this is sufficient. But if something is odd and you have a high prediction error because things are not working out as you expect, then you might need to go higher to the cognitive control layer and try to understand what's happening and if you need to use a different strategy. And that's what we've worked on. So I think the sense of the control is a much more detailed description than this sense of agency usually. And it refers to the feeling of controlling events outside the body, such as objects, other people, and environment. So it's also in social interaction. Are you still in control? Is a person responding to you the way you are expecting it? Or might there something be going on at the moment? So these are relevant things interacting with the real world. Okay. I will skip this a little bit. So we have a lot of publications on this. This is a more complex version of the whole thing. So we have here the control plan and the compensation on the low level sense of control. And here we have the situated context. We have the action field of actions that are available right now. And when these are able to change the strategy on this level again. So this one is active and this is only active when it's necessary or if somebody's alert for some reason. And this is actually the video we have. So that's environment. So we try to make it uncertain. We try to have events that are unexpected and that the agent needs to react on. And here's our small thing that's running around, and we could let participants do this task and also the agent do the task. And here we have the participant doing that, so you should not crash into that. Sometimes you have a drift from the side coming, so it blows the spaceship away. And it's one of our trials. So that was a nice environment to test this approach on sense of control in such a simulation. But of course, we would like to get into more complex. So this is, of course, a very simple left-right, still complex task, but the action alternatives are quite easy. That was a drift. And so to speed things up a little bit, we have a prediction error sometimes when a drift comes, for example. We also add noise in the system and see what effect does it have on the participants and also on our approach. So here you have a prediction error. If the prediction error is too big, you need to go to the high level. The low level sense of control drops, and you need to go over to the cognitive level and try to find another strategy so you are not crashing into something. And you need to adapt to specific events happening. And this is now the agent running. It's even better now. And you see the two different levels of control acting here. So I think these things are quite relevant as metacognitive processes if we are having such intelligent systems in the real world. This is quite similar actually to what Rasmussen was working on. So here we have the 3 levels of non-based behavior, rule-based behavior and skill-based behavior with sensory input and signals. But at the moment, people are either working on one level, the other level, or the next level, but not in an integrated way. So, oh yeah, it's also interesting. Our cognitive robots, and I just want to go to the last slide. Yeah. So as you see, there are a lot of cognitive principles that are quite relevant to have like a fuller picture of an agent in realistic environments. And we have now the techniques and methods to have those components that are not part of the cognitive architecture, like a good dialogue with humans or to process sensory input. Those we do have. So it's easy, well, not easy, but it's possible to integrate those and to do our research on the cognitive principles that are running that system and on the cognitive architecture to find out what is driving our cognitive systems in dynamic situations, and also to enable intelligent systems to better align with us. For example, also in care situation, in medical situations where we need to have control over large language models, because if it's just a component and it goes into an architecture and can control that, I can use these techniques and I'm not like left to the unknown what's happening there, but there we have a control level in there and we still can use these cognitive principles. Okay, so from scattered to fixed, that would be my vision for cognitive principles or for cognition in the wild. Thank you for your attention.
If you have questions, raise your hand, and if not, if you have one online, I will read it.
Yeah.
Well,
from you bring in this conference the idea of changing perspective regarding the artificial intelligence, and that is very important because of this distinction of intelligent agent. But what do you truly consider as intelligent? It must be a different from cognitive system, or at least there must be some knowledge of this cognitive systems, such as humans. That's what we can do. We can be aware, let's say, not on the situation itself, but also about processing of knowing that we exist in this world, and that there is so much question outside of our own situation, of our environment, of our own processes. But for not artificial intelligence, or at least for those that we have now, we have to put them in the purposes, whether it will be to learn that they must learn to adapt to others, or slash pilot, for example, to have pilots, but they cannot go beyond their code. They cannot go beyond their own programming that us humans would do. So for you, I will ask, what do you consider this artificial intelligence? What is this intelligence that we're trying to bring in?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So actually, I do, and you're completely right, I do think about two different cases. The one would be just to have a intelligent system, like a plane, a cockpit or something, to support the human being, to just anticipate it. And that's already a totally different perspective on cognitive architectures, how we can use it. And maybe it's not the whole blown cognitive architecture that would make sense there, but we can take those components we already know quite well. We can take those and put them into the systems to have a better anticipation. And then I think we should go one step further and build, I would call, cognitive agents that are able, as robots, for example, that are able to enter the same world. And I still think they will not from one day to the next be completely intelligent as I think we are, but at least they might have some alignment with us. So if I have this robot go into the hospital and support some people in the hospital because people don't have enough time to take care of them, they can interact, they can remember previous interactions. But of course, these must be designed very carefully and transparent in those cases, and we need to have some control. But at least in Germany, we will have more and more elderly people. We will need some technical support, and I rather have human-aware technical support there than non-human support or just entertainment, but not really systems that can get in closer contact or support, understand needs, adapt to special needs and capabilities, effects, or whatever. So these are, you're right, two different systems. I all call them intelligent systems, but the one would be more embodied, more, yeah, has a stronger case than the other one that's very specific to that one task, but still takes the environment into consideration. Okay. Yeah.
It's a shame you couldn't talk more about it. Was in the last slides, I think, that you skipped some of them. So there was the system that was playing a game, right? And we were detecting that the prediction didn't match something from the version, right? So my question is, so in this simple scenario, the action is tied to prediction, so you know which action exactly when the prediction fails. But in real world, the chain may take a bit longer. So you could get the wrong prediction, but it could be because the perception failed, maybe segmentation, any part of perception would fail. Could be your reasoning, could be something else in fact. So my question to you is, what do you think? Like, how do we solve this problem of attribution? So when something happens, how do we tie it back? How do we do this abduction step back to figure out what exactly we need to change?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So in our small environment, we had, for example, the drift coming, and the agent needed to learn the effect of the drift. And when it experiences it, then it can remember, oh, I had something similar before. But it's a very simple form. So I think for more complex forms of that, it will get more difficult. But we're thinking about letting small robots run around, and they have the information on, for example, if they go on a skewed level, they will need to have more motor running on the one side than the other side. And then they can learn, oh, this was this hill situation, and then they go through carpet and they are slower, so they can learn these very simple things, and when they experience them before, they might have an idea what it is. But if they go then into the snow, they might think, oh, that's a carpet situation. It's not, but maybe they use the same methods, more strength or going slower, whatever, that might solve this. But I think these are very crucial concepts we need to learn to get those systems into the real world. So we can, of course, train them. That's not a problem. But it will not help when we go into new situations. They can't cope with that if they don't have these mechanisms. And yeah, so I'm curious about how to find out how to do that. For those situations we had in that simple game, it's easier than for the robot running around, but I think they can also be solved, and maybe then we can also solve bigger things. So sometimes you need to explain away with some knowledge you have, maybe you have some experience. Sometimes you might just need to find out different strategies, how you can solve that problem, even if you don't know what it is. And I think with those strategies, you can solve a lot already. Maybe not everything, certainly not everything, but yeah. Like, okay. Yeah.
I'm curious, I love the vanguard pictures that you showed. The environment is cut from the agent, so there's like the connected architecture, then interaction with the environment. But what do you think of the radical difference between like artifacts and AIs and robots, but biological beings being within the environment, not having a mediated relationship, just cannot be outside of the environment. While we build fully with architectures, the interaction for the artificial artifacts.
So what are you thinking about, like skin?
Oh, in the embodied models
Yeah.
for eating chance. It's one of the main critiques saying we're not interacting with the environment, receiving, reflecting, then acting like kind of a sandwich models of the cognition or a snapshot models of perception. But we're always within the environment, even our body is in the environment, and the brain is the body. So for a biological being, it's like is the world as it is, cannot be elsewhere, maybe sci-fi or Black Mirror thing. But for the artifacts, the robots, the AI, that's the thing. It's like they left the world sense of the world meaning, the world feminine, the world sense.
Yeah. So for this sense of control, we do have different levels. So a lot of things will happen on the sensory motor level. So a lot of things we experience that we don't really have on our high cognitive level, but it's running on another level. And I think for this, cognitive architectures are not suitable. I think they are suitable for the higher level cognitive layer, but for the other one, we need different approaches. So that would be my answer. So yes, of course, we do this in a strict manner when we use cognitive architectures, but for the sense of control, I think that's a good example. We do have something running on another level, and that also has influences on us and also has an influence on our minimal active self. So what do I experience? Is my arm at the moment? Where is it? There are so many aspects where we know I can act now with my right hand, or I have a bottle in my hand and I cannot use that hand to, I don't know, use my card for something else. So this is a relevant element, and I think that's very crucial to bring these two components together. And we haven't learned so much about this because we have been specializing on specific processes, but I think now it's time to bring those back together, because this is quite crucial. And you're completely right. That is something we are just starting. Yeah.
I need your personal point of view. For you, what is the potential of role model in the cognitive architecture context? The role model, what is the potential for you in the cognitive architecture context?
Didn't get it. Is somebody?
The role model.
My model.
Role model.
My word model.
Role
Okay.
model, yes.
Yeah.
You are looking.
Yeah. So actually, I believe that world models don't need to be complete. So we are sometimes in situations and we are trying to process the relevant information, but not everything at once, because it's not possible. Our cognitive system is bounded. So if we are in a specific situation, our brain tries to filter and has an expectation in what kind of situation I'm in, and it's just working with those information that I think fit to the situation. That might sometimes go wrong, but that's the way our cognitive system works. So I'm actually in favor of simplifying sometimes our models to get them realistic, because that's sometimes something I learned from cognitive modeling. The more complex you think and the more complex your models get, the less good they get, actually. And yeah, so I think a world model can be, of course, I have some mental models about the world, and I do have some facts about the world, but I think it's a situation awareness is quite an interesting concept to look at, to focus on what is really the information that's relevant and that I'm able to have directly accessible at this moment.
That's maybe a solution for the representation of the cognition of robot, for example. No.
So for I like this picture from ACT-R with all the buffer information being available, and we have the working memory that holds up what I think the most important aspects are right now, and everything else I need to process that is more complex will take more time, actually. So and then reasoning about it and things like that will take time. So either I'm reacting to what I think is right, or I realize I'm wrong, then I need some time to pause, to process, or get that and retrieve that information. Good.
I see you.
Thank you.